My name is Lecia Brooks. I use she, her pronouns, and I come to you today from Montgomery, Alabama, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Muskogee Creek Nation. I'm happy to be able to be on this land with these people, the Muskogee Creek, people who preceded African Americans who also lived in this space. To move from from Los Angeles to Montgomery, Alabama is more than an ocean. But I have to tell you that there's so much richness here, so much history here, and so much that feeds me here. But first, a little bit of a background on the Southern Poverty Law Center. SPLC is a catalyst for racial justice in the South and beyond, working in partnership with communities to dismantle white supremacy, strengthen intersectional movements, and advance the human rights of all people. We were founded in 1971 as a civil rights public interest law firm. And we've come a long, long way. And I would add that we have a long way to go to live into our mission and vision for a world in which everyone can thrive and the ideals of equity, justice, and liberation are a reality for all. In the introduction that Fernando offered, he mentioned that I had the honor to serve as the Chief Workplace Transformation Officer. One of my favorite job titles. And it was a transformative experience for me. Some of you may have heard that the Southern Poverty Law Center went through a pretty public upheaval in March of 2019. And so we found ourselves an organization almost 50 years old, committed to social justice, doing social justice work and doing good work, not living up to those standards internally. And so we continue to go through this period of transformation. The mission statement that I shared with you earlier about that I think is intentional, places us in the South, places us squarely with the intention of disrupting white supremacy, is new to the Southern Poverty Law Center. And I share that with you because we're all on our journey. And though Southern Poverty Law Centers existed for 50 years, we're just getting there too. So as we engage in this conversation around white supremacy and white supremacy culture, I want you to know that I'm on that journey with you. I came to the center in 2004, moving from Los Angeles to Montgomery to join the Teaching Tolerance team. The mandate of Teaching Tolerance is to help teachers and schools educate children and youth to be active participants in a diverse democracy. This SPLC project has also experienced some transformation of late and is now known as Learning for Justice. I expect the mandate to change soon, reflecting a more intentional focus on disrupting and dismantling white supremacy culture and advancing anti-racist practices in K-12 schools and communities. I also come to you as a former classroom teacher. I had the honor and privilege of growing and learning from my students and their families at 95th Street Prep School in South Los Angeles. And yes, I still miss it. My students anyway. I don't know about all of it, but I miss my students terribly. I used to refer to myself as just a little Black girl from Oakland, California. Obviously, I've had to adapt that. Now I'm just an old Black woman from Oakland. And to show my age to those who may pick up on it, I'm a race woman too. The older I get, the more grateful I am to have grown up in Oakland, California during the 60s. Not because I received a stellar education during my K-8 career in Oakland public schools, but because of the people, Black people, who were organizing for systemic change on my behalf long before people even named it as such. And I was in the middle of it. But then again, I wasn't. I grew up in a home that was Black, but not too Black. My parents were part of the Black migration from the South to the North and the West. My mother from Texas, my father from Mississippi. And though I don't have clear memories of how or when messages were transmitted, my guess is it was through listening in on grown folks' conversation. I knew that at an early age, my father did not like white people. And the older I got, the more visceral his messages became. My mother, on the other hand, was like all about moving on up in that Jefferson's kind of way. And though it was clear to all that our move from a housing development to our own home hadn't changed things too dramatically. She, my mother, subscribed to Ebony and Jet magazines. We attended the Black Baptist Church. Our social circle was exclusively Black, mostly extended family. And yet I was being taught to internalize the don't be too Black narrative. I do have vivid memories of how this message was transmitted. Whenever we were visiting someone, going to the store, or just going outside to play, we received a harsh warning: behave. So when in the background, I began to hear counter narratives like Black is beautiful, say it loud and Black and I'm proud, all power to the people, I didn't know what to make of things. The Black empowerment movement was taking place literally outside of our front door, and yet no one talked to me about it. Not at home, not at church, not in the classroom. Sometimes I wonder what would have been different for me, my siblings, my cousins, and my classmates had we been invited to give voice to the social movement that gripped my city and changed my life. I share this story with you because I want you to remember that even though adults, parents, grandparents, teachers, caregivers too often fail to acknowledge and make space for children to unpack the issues of the day, they are still processing it, or trying to anyway. You can change that. You can commit yourself to anti-racist practice. You can help to raise up children, BIPOC and white, who are able to make sense of what is happening around them. Help them to be joy-filled and resilient. Help them to become students who can recognize and challenge for themselves white supremacy culture. And work to shape inclusive communities where their possibility to thrive, really thrive, exists. You gentle, you bold, you tenacious, courageous teacher can do that. Of course, first, you'll have to commit yourself to interrogating and rooting out the active and dormant vestiges of white supremacy culture within yourself. And you'll have to recommit to that every single day. As Dr. Kendi is helping us all to understand and embrace, it's not enough to be not racist. We must commit to developing an anti-racist practice. Now, I am most certainly not an expert, but I do have some opinions as to where you might begin. Let's start with racial equity trainer and scholar Tima Akum's teachings on the subject. What is white supremacy culture? And you may be thinking, why does she keep using that term? It makes me uncomfortable. I want you to check in for yourself on that. Tell yourself the truth. You can also substitute dominant for supremacy if that helps you listen better. So white dominant culture as opposed to white supremacy culture, if it helps you listen better. But just know that your comfortability is a manifestation of white supremacist culture. It's everywhere. So what is white supremacy culture? It's the explicit to subtle ways that norms, preferences, and fears of white European descended people overwhelmingly shape how we organize our work and our institutions, how we see ourselves and how we see others, how we interact with one another, how we interact with time, and how we make decisions. I'm going to go back a second. It's explicit and subtle ways that the norms, preferences, and fears of European descended people overwhelmingly shape how we think, how we see the world, how we process things, how we walk in the world. Norms may manifest themselves as either or thinking, or maybe paternalism, competition, perfectionism, to a sense of comfort with predominantly white leadership. Let me interject that this white supremacy culture frame dominates each of us, not just white folks, each of us. It might manifest itself as a fear of open conflict, or fear of engaging in conflict, or just not wanting to be nice. Say the nice thing, say the right thing, don't upset anyone. And don't become upset yourselves. All this leading you to believe that you have a right to comfort, that you have a right to be comfortable. So many things, so many ways each of us have been exposed to and internalized white supremacy culture. Those who answer the call to teach bring their indoctrination with them and are fed even more through teacher preparation programs. There's no way around it. Let us not overlook the fact that the K-12 teacher populations continue to be largely white, largely middle class, and largely female. White supremacy culture centers whiteness. And schools of education recenter it by avoiding discussions of racism and white supremacy. Don't talk about it, it reinforces it. Talk about it, you have an opportunity to break it up, create something new. Teaching Tolerance Advisory Board member Natalie Odom, a visiting clinical assistant professor of education at Indiana University at Purdue, makes the case for dismantling white supremacy in schools, beginning with teacher prep programs. She says university school partnerships and clinical practice should go beyond the traditional role of providing student teachers with exposure. Instead of avoiding uncomfortable or confrontational discussions, teacher preparation programs should teach future teachers how to advocate for their students. Current teachers, school leaders, and district personnel should work alongside teacher educators to discuss what is happening in schools and in local districts. How much time is spent in that way in teacher education programs? My own experience with a teacher ed program came up woefully short. Fortunately, I had some exposure on my own through NCCJ and other programs and experiences that I had. They had one class on multiculturalism, one. And the book was awful. Granted, it was a while ago, but I don't think it has evolved enough as it needs to. Although I'm confident that the program at LMU is well on its way to preparing teachers to engage in the lifelong practice of truth telling and healing. Truth telling and healing. This is what it means to really engage in anti-racist practice in our K-12 schools. Truth telling and healing. Anti-racist educators recognize the power and the privilege of their positions. They are committed to continuously checking themselves by developing a critical consciousness that challenges their own beliefs and practices. That's what I said at the onset. You have to commit to interrogating the remnants of this culture in you daily. It's not one class, it's not one program. It's a lifelong practice. And let me underscore practice for a moment, because I had a friend who really helped me, said, Phil, help me with practice. It's like, it's practice, Lecia. Not perfection. It's the practice. It's the doing. It's the commitment to do. It's the practice. And if you can say that you've committed to the practice, I have no doubt that you'll get there or get to where you need to be. Anti-racist educators recognize that our institutions were built on a foundation of white supremacy, and they're committed to uprooting it. Let's stop there. Do you believe that our institutions, and including our schools, were built on a foundation of white supremacy? Can't be an anti-racist educator if you don't see that. Anti-racist educators also listen to their students. They agitate and they seek to disrupt the systems that are harmful to their students. Anti-racist educators center students, not their own comfort, not the school, not the system, the students. Sometimes it could be done intentionally. I just, in my short teaching career, I was just nonconformist. I just didn't do, I just closed the door, do what I want to do. That doesn't work for everyone. I remember at 95th Street, my class was bilingual 5th grade class, primarily migrant students. And I remember the Pledge of Allegiance, and I think the first day, they like all got up to do the pledge. I'm like, what? Wait, what? What are you doing? Why are you doing this? Just simple things like that, simple practices like that. Just like we train ourselves and our children so quickly to pick up and adopt these practices that we don't even stop to think about. Back to my script. So you agitate and disrupt, and you center your students. It's not just your students, and I want to say that and make that clear, because sometimes your classroom teachers are like, "Oh, my students, my kids," but the kids next door, not those kids. These are my kids, and we've got to figure it out in here. Anti-racist educators care not just about their students in their classroom. Anti-racist educators consider the entire school system. I have another really great Teaching Talent Advisory Board member, Jamila Pitts. She's an equity and justice strategist who works to center the liberation, healing, and holistic development of youth, particularly children of color. And she offers the following dimensions of schooling for our consideration. Remember, I'm talking beyond the classroom. So the anti-racist educator, again, is not solely concerned with the classroom, but also with the demographics of the staff at the school. Concerned about school leadership, school governance, school curriculum, special education, teaching and learning practices across the school, not just in your classroom. You're concerned about the definitions and measurements of academic success. Who defines success? You? Your students? Is there any room to redefine success? Definitions and measurements of teacher success. Professional development, new teacher training and support, the wellness of teachers, staff, and students. The school's mission and vision statements. And I would add their mascots. School, network, and district policies. Yep, you have to be concerned about those things too. School culture and the school's approaches to discipline. The school infrastructure. Is the school's infrastructure set up in a way that centers the needs of the students and the families? Or is it set up to benefit the administrators, paid teachers? And you want to concern yourself about the allocation of resources and budget. So anti-racist practice in schooling should lead to an ending of schools as we know them. If we're all practicing it, we're all doing it, schools will look completely different. This is another check-in moment for you. Are you prepared for that? Do you want that? Do you know what that means? Be radically different.
And then we can.
Anti-racist educators also know that all forms of oppression are connected. An anti-racist educator cannot truly care about race or racism and not care about transphobia, classism, anti-Semitism, misogyny. It's all connected. Anti-racist educators take a holistic view of their students, of themselves, of individuals in the world. Anti-racist educators believe in liberation. They believe we all need to get free. I believe we all need to get free. I need to get free. And I'm guessing you do too. So let's free ourselves and our students and watch what happens. That's all I have for my talk. I'm not a lecturer, but I wanted to share those thoughts with you. And then I want to share the Teaching Tolerance website because it's just a tremendous resource for you, and it's free. Everything's free. The most current issue, our current issue of the magazine that just came out last month is just incredible. and white supremacy in education. And like all these fantastic articles, everything that you need to know. And of course, excellent resources. We've done a really good job over the years of getting better and better and better about our curriculum for Black History Month, moving beyond, you know, the heroes and holiday kind of frame, providing that window and mirror for students, allowing them to see themselves, inviting them to see themselves rather. There's professional development materials that you can take on your own, guides, webinars, podcasts, everything you need. Some really good resources, excellent resources on show you teaching hard history. Teaching hard history is a curriculum we developed a couple years ago. It's kind of like the 1619 project. Interestingly, we were both creating these programs at the same time, and ours hasn't been targeted as hard as some others. You can build lesson plans. It has a great little tool, great little filters that help you build a lesson plan on anything. It's a great literary library. Just build everything out. So I wanted to share that with you, and it's free. I think I mentioned that. Then I wanted to share with you part of the work that I do at the Southern Poverty Law Center is a lot of the work I do is in the realm of tracking and monitoring hate and extremist groups. It's weirdly become my thing, which I also believe is anti-racist practice. Like I'm trying to, it's up to me to do what I can do to steer young white males primarily, but white people in general, young people in general, away from these messages that are being delivered more and more forcefully to white students. I'm of the opinion that white families don't talk about race, don't want to talk about them being white, and so their kids are left to have other people define for them what it means to be white. When we first went into the COVID era, we were really concerned about the time that kids were spending online, because we know that it's a space where they're radicalized. So we worked with American University to put out this guide for parents and caregivers on how to first recognize the signs and disrupt the radicalization process. It's very, very interesting. So it's also all about building resilience and talking and truth telling and healing. Somebody's got to do it. And you might be the one. You might be the teacher that notices when a white kid says something that may make you think of an extremist group or a conspiracy theorist group. Are you challenging them? Are you saying anything? Are you speaking up? Are you saying, hey, where'd you get that? Why do you think that? You need to speak up and interrupt that thinking, because what's happening to these kids is they're just going down the rabbit hole and talking to people that will talk to them. So that's a free resource too. With that, I will stop and open it up to you all.